How do you conduct a 7 waste evaluation? Stay tuned. This is the 7 waste evaluation template available from sixsigma.org on the Downloads tab. Notice that there's 2 parts to the template. The first part is the production or manufacturing portion of the template, and the second part is the office or transactional part of the template. For this illustration, we're going to assume we have a production process, so we just click on the audit sheet, go there, it takes us to this sheet. Now, anywhere you see a yellow cell, it's asking you for an input, so the first thing I'm going to do is give this process or project name a name for the file. So let's assume that it's the heat treat process. And from here, then we begin by answering each of the 5 questions for each of the 7 ways. So the first one is transportation, and transportation, very briefly, is unnecessary movement of parts or information. And the first question is, parts are moved more than one time at a given operation or process step. So the way you would answer that is look at this scale, 9 being always, 5 sometimes, 1 never, and the answer goes again in the yellow cell because that's where an input is expected. So we might say, for example, answer the question as parts are moved more than one time at a given operation or process step, and perhaps that is always true, so we would enter it there. On to the second question, which is the work area layout is not optimized, and if it's not optimized, and let's say that there's been some optimization efforts, but perhaps more optimization is required, maybe we put that at 5. Third question, a spaghetti diagram is not used regularly to help to identify transportation. Perhaps that's true, maybe we've never used a spaghetti diagram or very infrequently. Question number 4, machines forced me to move parts multiple times, and let's suppose that that is maybe a 7. It's almost always true. And the last question is, a process forces me to move parts multiple times, and let's say that that is true as well. And on you would continue with the second waste, which is inventory, and again you can read here very briefly that inventory is raw material, work in process, or finished goods that are not currently having value added to them. So in and of itself, inventory is not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when they're not having value added to them. And you would go through the 5 questions and answer them appropriately. So setup or changeover times are more than 1 minute, and if that's true in this operation, then we would score that perhaps a 9, a 7, or a 9, or something very high. Now I'm not going to go through each of the questions here, but I will put a value in so you can see what the result might look like. So let's say that the next few questions, and I'm arbitrarily just picking answers or values for each of the questions here. You would obviously answer each question as a team or have the process owner answer these questions. And again, I'm going to just arbitrarily pick some numbers. Now you wouldn't do this, of course, but I'm going to do it for the sake of time and illustration. We come down here and perhaps we are using a 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9 scale, and it'll give you as good guidance as is needed for the 7 waste evaluation. I would say do this as a team, and if at all possible, you want to get as much input on the process as you can from people who are knowledgeable about the process. Of course, the team, some members may not be so familiar with the process, but that's okay. I'm just going to continue on here, and perhaps the answer looks something like this. Now, once you've got all the questions answered, and I would suggest that somewhere in the 15 to 30 minute range is all that's really necessary to answer these questions. I wouldn't spend too much more time on that. Remember, you're just looking for guidance, and I'll show you where that comes from. So that once I've got the questions answered or evaluated, I filled in each of the yellow cells, then I click on the radar chart. And so now this is the 7 waste evaluation for the heat treat process. I've got a total score of 187 out of a possible 315. Now in the 7 waste evaluation, the higher the score, the more waste you have in your process. And so we're looking for, this is called a radar chart, and we're looking for those wastes that scored high. So for example, transportation scored very high. Defects scored quite low. So I might look at transportation. I might also look at over-processing and then perhaps maybe inventory as the 3 top areas to go, and dig a little deeper and try and understand what is it about transportation that could use some improvements to reduce the waste. Now, I can also go back to the audit sheet if I wanted to look at, let me go back to the radar chart. So if, for example, I wanted to look at transportation, I wanted to go back to the audit sheet, then obviously what I would do here is pick out those questions that scored very high, because remember, this seems to indicate that there's high waste. And I would say, well, given that parts are moved more than one time at a given operation or process step, why is that? And how could the number of steps or the number of times that parts are moved, how could that be reduced? And then I might want to describe that off on the side here. So we might say reduce redundant machines, say, for example, or something along that nature, okay? And then I might pick the next 9. A spaghetti diagram is not used regularly to help identify transportation, and so I might say introduce the spaghetti diagram, and maybe it's once per quarter or something like that, whatever seems reasonable. And perhaps this one is the process forces me to move parts multiple times, and what could I do in that case? And I'm just going to put here something, the ABC, all right? And then those are the things you want to go work on. Now, back to the radar chart. Notice I like to call these compass, because they don't give me specific direction, but they do give me some guidance as to where to go to look for opportunities for waste elimination. So in this particular case, obviously transportation is an area that maybe has more opportunity than, say, defects that scored very low. And then the overprocessing, overproduction, weighting, motion all seem to score in the 30 so range, somewhere in there. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to go back to the main menu. So that is the production side of the template. If you have a transactional or office type environment, you wanted to do a 7 waste evaluation, then I would similarly go to the audit sheet, and it's the same thing. So here I might go to the, maybe I'm looking at the billing process, and so I would key that in here, and the very same process. Now the transportation in this case is, the definition is slightly different for an office environment. In this case, it's unnecessary movement of data. And then I've got a little bit of a description here that gives you a feel for what that looks like in many organizations. So transportation, anecdotally, 55% of Fortune 500 information technology departments spend their time dealing with data transportation, moving data between databases, files, file share locations, backup tapes, and this sort of thing. So as I did with the production environment, I'm going to go ahead and work through each of these questions. So the data is moved more than one time, and perhaps that's true very, very frequently or all the time. Each move can cause a defect. We know that to be true. Anytime you move something, it introduces an opportunity for problems, a defect, delay, and this sort of thing. So let's say that that's almost always true. When data is updated, it must be updated in more than one location. This is common in organizations, and let's say in our organization we understand that to be almost always. The technology forces me to move data multiple times. Perhaps you're using tools that don't have a full feature set, and so you've got to move between, say, for example, a database and Excel spreadsheet type format. So perhaps I'll score that a 9. And the process forces me to move data multiple times, multiple systems, that sort of thing. So perhaps that's sometimes true in our organization. And then, like I did with the production score sheet or audit sheet, I'll continue to answer these questions. So on the inventory side, in this case, it's redundant data sources. And anecdotally, large organizations store a single fact of data about 10 different times. And this could be names, employee names, and this sort of thing, customer databases or customer names and that sort of thing. So what I would do then is, and I'll just fill these out. Now again, I'm arbitrarily just picking some numbers here. You wouldn't do that, of course. You would want to answer these questions and try and assess it as best you could, given your understanding of the process, but for right now I'm just going to put a number in here. And like the production evaluation, what I'm trying to do is get some idea of where the opportunities tend to lie. There's some ancillary questions here which I won't fill out, but now I'm going to go to the radar chart, and again, similar to the production environment, this is the 7 waste evaluation for the billing process. I've scored 157 out of 315, and it looks like transportation scored the highest. And if I wanted to again remind myself of where the opportunities were, I would go back to the audit sheet under transportation, go back to the audit sheet, and we might want to consider why the data is being moved more than one time, how we can eliminate defects at each move, and what could we do about the technology that's forcing me to move data multiple times, and this sort of thing. Okay, and again I can switch back between the radar chart and the audit sheet or the main menu. So that's the 7 wastes evaluation tool. It's very handy. It's not meant to be prescriptive. Of course, it is meant to have the team think through the process that is in front of them or under evaluation. I hope you enjoy the 7 waste tool. I would encourage you to go to the sixsigma.org website. There's many resources there, including some online training that deals specifically with 7 waste. Thanks for watching the video.